Hi, welcome back. So in this lecture, we're going to cover relationships and psychosocial development in emerging adulthood. Emerging adulthood is the stage that roughly is between the ages of 18 and 29 years of age. It does not look the same for everyone. So emerging adulthood, the concept of that developed mainly in Western societies as a response to social changes like longer education, later marriage, and delayed parenthood. Not all young people experience this stage, and for those who do, it unfolds very differently based on cultural and socioeconomic factors. Some characteristics of emerging adulthood are demographic instability. So, this is the most unstable period in life. There's a high prevalence of mental health disorders. Most people in their late teens and early 20s do not identify as adolescents, nor do they identify as adults. And adulthood is really based on personal characteristics. So it's a primary time for identity exploration, and it's both a rewarding and stressful experience. There's a lot of changes in romantic relationships. Most emerging adults have a sense of optimism towards the future. Some people go to college, others start working right after high school, and others may begin families early on. College students often remain financially and emotionally dependent on parents. And so they use college as a safe space to explore different jobs, relationships, and beliefs. In contrast, young people who work full-time, live independently, or become parents early may enter adulthood more quickly. Those from low-income backgrounds or who face challenges may skip or experience a shorter version of emerging adulthood. Higher socioeconomic status young adults often feel optimistic, self-focused, and they're sort of in between. So there's a difference between high SES young adults and lower SES. Lower SES young adults tend to report more stress, instability, and less freedom to explore emerging adulthood. So there is a contextual nature of emerging adulthood. These transitions are not universal. Versions of it can appear in many parts of the world, including North and South America, Europe, Israel, China, Japan, and Malaysia. However, what it means to be an adult and how people define adulthood varies by culture. Across cultures, most young people agree that taking responsibility for one's actions is the most important sign of adulthood, but other traits differ. So in North America, independence and financial stability are key. In Argentina, caring for children is central. In Israel, it is handling pressure. In Romania, following social norms. And in China, controlling emotions. So all of these differences reflect the unique cultural values about what adulthood is. Most research on emerging adulthood has been conducted with Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic populations, especially from the US and Western Europe. So this limits how well findings apply to other regions. There were some studies in Ghana and Nigeria, and they found that young adults valued independence and caring for family as key markers of adulthood, yet most already viewed themselves as adults. So this shows that while emerging adulthood can appear globally, its specific features depend on cultural, social, and economic contexts. Identity development is a central task in emerging adulthood. Although the search for identity begins in adolescence, most people don't fully establish a stable sense of self until their late teens and 20s. And so today, this process takes longer than in the mid 20th century because young adults are now often delaying the workforce, marrying or starting a family. And so they're still working on their identity development. And people develop a sense of identity in many ways. Moral identity, which is how important being a good, honest, and fair person is to your sense of self. Religious identity is how religion or spirituality shape your life. Political identity is how people understand and participate in voting, volunteering, and reflecting on community responsibilities. Gender and sexual identity is feeling comfortable with one's gender and sexuality. Ethnic racial identity is exploring and valuing your cultural or racial background. And so identity development is multidimensional. Someone might feel secure in one area, like politics, but still explore other areas like religion or sexuality. And so achieving a stable sense of identity is linked to well-being, happiness, and life satisfaction. And so research shows that identity continues to develop through early adulthood and beyond, and even into middle and late adulthood. Erickson also highlighted the challenges of forming intimate relationships in early adulthood. So, intimacy versus isolation involves the ability to make deep emotional connections and commit to a romantic partner. And so, during this time, we, as early adults, we develop a capacity for intimacy and commitment. So successfully forming intimacy is linked to well-being, while failing to develop close relationships can lead to loneliness and isolation. Many emerging adults struggle with intimacy because they are still forming their identity and gaining independence. Those who have achieved a clear sense of self are generally more ready for committed relationships. Entering a relationship often requires compromise and adjustment. And this is as people integrate their identity with that of their partner. And so balancing personal goals and shared goals is an important part of growing both as an individual and as a romantic partner. Attachment refers to the emotional bonds that we form with others, starting with our primary caregivers in infancy. And these early attachments help children feel safe and confident to explore the world. There are several types of attachment styles. And so there's secure, insecure avoidant, and insecure resistant. Secure attachment refers to children feeling confident and being able to express emotions freely. This typically develops when children have very secure attachments with their caregiver, and their caregiver is expressing consistent warmth and love. And so children then grow up and they tend to be comforted when they're upset, and they tend to feel more confident in terms of being confident in their relationships. Insecure avoidant attachment are where children avoid closeness and rely little on caregivers. And typically this is because they've had issues with their caregivers, either avoiding love or not giving them enough love. And so they tend to be more insecure, but then they develop an avoidant attachment style. Insecure attachment, resistant attachment are where children are ambivalent and clingy, but they're also angry towards caregivers. And so these early experiences shape internal models of relationships and influence how we expect others to respond and how worthy of love that we feel. Early experiences affect but do not fully determine adult attachment. So adults can develop secure or insecure patterns over time based on their relationships and experiences. As adults, secure, attached adults communicate well, they manage conflict well, they feel satisfied and committed, they are able to regulate their emotions, and they generally enjoy better mental and physical health. Avoidant attached adults tend to keep their emotional distance. Like I said, as they were kids, their caregivers may have not been warm towards them or showing inconsistencies in love and affection. And so avoidant adults tend to avoid sharing feelings, and they may struggle with intimacy. They also tend to value their independence more. Anxious, resistant adults fear abandonment. So they worry about their self worth, they seek constant reassurance, and they sometimes overwhelm their partners. And so they tend to have caregivers that were also not very affectionate, or they felt that they weren't getting enough love from their caregivers. And so they develop these anxious, resistant attachment styles. And so the key takeaway here is that secure attachment supports healthy, close relationships and overall well being, while insecure attachment can make emotion regulation and stress management harder. And so it can increase the risk for mental and physical health problems. The social clock refers to society's expectations for when major life events should happen, like finishing school, starting a career, marrying, or retiring. Emerging adults may adjust these timelines based on their personal goals and cultural norms. So these age-related expectations can vary from individual to culture. And so people tend to compare their progress with peers, and they often describe themselves as early, on time, or late in reaching certain milestones. How closely someone aligns with the social clock can affect their self-esteem and psychological health. But the key idea is that there is no single right timeline. Life paths differ based on goals, experiences, and circumstances. Sexual activity tends to be highest during young adulthood, and it gradually declines through middle age. Many emerging adults who are often unmarried explore their sexuality through casual sex. About 2/3 of college students report having at least one hookup, and many of those occur at parties and involve alcohol. Although both men and women engage in casual sex, women often face more negative social judgments for doing so. So there tends to be a double standard for women. Overall, people generally experience positive emotions after sexual activity. About 1/3 of all women will experience sexual assault or rape at some point in their lives, and in most cases, the perpetrator is someone the victim knows. Survivors of sexual assault face an increased risk of developing PTSD, though strong social support can help reduce these effects. Broader social and cultural factors also play a role. Rape myths and gender stereotypes can reinforce attitudes that tolerate or normalize sexual violence. So now we'll go over friendships and relationships in emerging adulthood. Close friendships are based on reciprocity, sharing, supporting, giving advice, and emotional closeness. Emerging adult and adolescent friendships are pretty similar. Women usually rely more on friends for emotional needs than men. Men often bond with others through shared activities, but their self disclosure increases over time. Different sex friendships provide support and help understand gender differences, but they tend to be less stable than same sex friendships. High quality friendships are linked to better well being, social skills, and lower depression and loneliness. As adults progress through emerging adulthood, they do tend to see their friends a lot less. A key task of early adulthood is also forming long term intimate relationships. And this is based on mate selection. So selecting partners that have similar attitudes, values as them. Physical attractiveness initially drives interest for both men and women. And so both men and women judge attractiveness before they pursue further contact with that partner. Similarity breeds relationship satisfaction. So we tend to seek out partners that are similar to us. And many of the time, similarities in values and attitudes predict relationship satisfaction, and they matter more than our demographic similarities. Men often value youth and appearance. Women prioritize intelligence, moral character, and earning potential. Over time, adults start to become less selective. So this increases chances for forming solid relationships. And like I said earlier, similarity matters more than differences for lasting satisfaction. And so partners that share values, beliefs, education, personality, and habits tend to help them connect better with their partner and overall tend to predict better relationship satisfaction. So there's some research on technology and mate selection. Research shows that over 1/4 of emerging adults have used a dating site or app. Emerging adults use dating apps as an easier way to meet more people. And online dating allows for greater control of first impressions. And so a lot of electronic interaction now occurs before two individuals actually meet in person for a date. As online daters have more options, they may find themselves less satisfied with finding a suitable partner. So there are pros and cons to online dating, but the online dating does give people access to many potential new partners and allow more control over their impressions of that person. Challenges include too many options, which can make it harder to actually choose a partner or feel satisfied. So online dating relationships, they often mirror traditional dating in dynamics and outcomes. Again, many people enjoy excitement, communication ease, and self-validation from online dating, but again, it does have its challenges where too many options can actually make it harder to find a relationship. According to Sternberg, love has 3 different components. Passion, which is the physical attractiveness we feel for somebody and the excitement we feel. Intimacy, which is the emotional closeness and caring behavior, and commitment is the decision to stay together. And so these 3 different combinations create different types of love. You can have high passion for someone, but low intimacy and commitment, or you can have high commitment and low passion and intimacy. Young adults typically experience high passion. Older adults often experience higher commitment. And over time, passion declines, but intimacy and commitment typically grow and determine relationship stability. Love is dynamic. Intimacy and passion influence each other daily, and long-term relationships often maintain their happiness through mutual appreciation of ups and downs. The Western ideals of love contain all of these 3 elements. And so during emerging adulthood, individuals in more individualistic Western cultures typically focus on exploring their personal identity and autonomy. And so young adults typically are going with what it feels right. They may love in terms of passion or intimacy, whereas in young adults in collectivistic societies are more likely to navigate the period with attention to how their decisions and relationships are aligned with what their family wants and their social norms. So the relationships, whether they be romantic, family-based, or peer-based, they're often guided by cultural values such as respect for hierarchy, emotional restraint, and reciprocity, which is very different from the Western ideals of passion, intimacy, and commitment. Intimate partner violence refers to physical, sexual, or emotional abuse that's directed towards a romantic partner. There's one severe form called intimate terrorism, and this involves chronic and coercive control, repeated battering, and represents the most damaging type of intimate partner violence. Approximately 1 in 3 men and women experience physical, intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Early exposure to violence in childhood can increase the likelihood of later perpetrating or experiencing intimate partner violence. Additionally, economic hardship and limited community resources can exacerbate the risk of partner violence. Cultural norms and values also play a role. Higher rates are observed in societies that emphasize female submissiveness. Despite the harm caused, many victims remain in abusive relationships, and these are due to factors such as fear, financial dependence, and limited access to support systems. In early adulthood, many people marry, but others live with a partner or they remain single by choice or circumstance. Today, marriage often happens later in life, and more adults are choosing not to marry at all. About 8% remain single. Cohabitation before marriage is now common, and many couples live together long term without getting married. Singlehood or living without a romantic partner is increasingly common among young adults. In 2019, about 1/4 of adults ages 35 to 39 had never married. And while single adults still hope to marry someday, others are content and find fulfillment on their own. Women are somewhat more likely than men to remain single, and this is often due to preferences for partners who are older or equally successful. Some people stay single to focus on their careers or personal growth, whereas others enjoy independence and freedom. Single adults also tend to have strong social networks and maintain close ties with family, friends, and neighbors. Many report that meaningful relationships outside of romance bring satisfaction and well-being. And so for many, singlehood offers independence, connection, and opportunities for self-fulfillment. Cohabitation is also common. So cohabitation means living together without marriage. So as more young people spend time in school and take longer to start their careers, a lot of people cohabit. Today, over half of adults in their 20s have lived with a romantic partner, and about 70% of US couples live together before getting married. So cohabitation is more common in the early 20s. Marriage becomes more common by the late 20s and early 30s. The meaning of cohabitation is changing. So it used to be seen as a step towards marriage, but now fewer couples expect to marry, and many end their relationships without getting married. Young adults may move in together for practical reasons such as saving money, convenience, changes in housing or jobs, or pregnancy. For many, cohabitation allows flexibility and helps them explore a relationship without long-term commitment while still figuring out their careers and adult lives. People from different cultural and economic backgrounds also experience cohabitation differently. Black and Latinx young adults and those with lower incomes are more likely to cohabit long-term instead of marrying. Higher income and white young adults often marry after living together. Around the world, cultures vary and how they view cohabitation. So in many European countries, it's widely accepted and it even provides legal rights similar to marriage, such as shared insurance and financial benefits. But in more traditional societies like Ireland, Italy, Japan, and the Philippines, living together before marriage is rare, and it's actually discouraged in those types of cultures. Marriage rates have declined in recent decades, but most adults in the US still marry at some point in their lives. So by age 45, we see about 80% of adults have married at least once, and by age 60, that number rises to 90%. Today, people are getting married later than ever. So the average age for a first marriage is 28.1 for women and 30.5 for men, which is a big increase from 50 years ago. Similar trends are seen in other Western countries where the average age of marriage is in the early to mid 30s. Marriage can offer many economic, physical, and psychological benefits. We see that married people tend to live longer, be healthier, and report greater happiness and financial stability than those who are not married. However, the early years of marriage can be challenging as couples adjust to living together, sharing responsibilities, and managing their money. Many newlyweds experience stress or conflict during this period, especially if there's debt or disagreements arise. Couples who communicate with warmth, empathy, and respect, and who can calmly resolve conflicts, tend to have more satisfying and lasting marriages. The age at which people marry is a very important factor. Generally, the younger the bride and groom, the less likely the marriage will succeed. Emotional maturity and a strong sense of identity are key to building a stable relationship. Similarity between partners, such as in values, education, and lifestyle, also predict marital success. Over time, long-term partners often become more alike in personality, habits, and even physical and mental health. Mental health and well-being are closely linked to the quality of a marital relationship. So when partners share household duties equally and view each other as equal contributors, they tend to report higher levels of marital satisfaction. So the perception of fairness, which is feeling that both partners contribute equally, matters just as much as actual equality. Overall, couples who communicate well, share responsibilities, and support one another emotionally are more likely to enjoy long-lasting happy marriages. So now we're going to cover same-sex marriages. So research shows that same-sex and different sex couples share similar experiences when it comes to love, commitment, and what makes a marriage satisfying. Before 2015, studying same-sex marriage was difficult because it was not legal in every U.S. state. But after the Supreme Court's Hodges decision, they legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, so more couples were able to form legal unions, and research on these relationships has now expanded. Studies comparing same-sex and different sex couples find that both groups report similar levels of love, happiness, and relationship satisfaction. They also face some of the same challenges, such as conflict and intimate partner violence. Same-sex couples break up at about the same rate as different sex couples and experience similar emotional and physical health benefits from legal marriage. Research has found that married same-sex adults tend to have better mental health and lower distress than unmarried same-sex adults or unmarried heterosexual people. Marriage satisfaction in same-sex couples is linked to feelings of equality, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. Legal recognition of same-sex marriage has also improved overall health and happiness among LGBTQ plus individuals by reducing stress and social stigma. Before marriage was legalized nationwide, same-sex couples living in states that allowed it already showed better self-esteem, health, and connection than those in states that did not. These findings highlight how social policies and laws can have powerful effects on people's mental health and quality of life. Since the 1960s, the divorce rates have risen sharply and then gradually declined. So in the US, the divorce peaked in the early 1980s at about 5 per 1,000 people, but then by 2018, that number dropped to around 3 per 1,000. Divorce rates still differ widely across countries. Russia has one of the highest, while Ireland has one of the lowest. This can show that culture and social factors play a big role in divorce. In the US, most divorces happen within the first 10 years of marriage, and by 45, about 1/3 of men and women have been divorced. Couples who are older and share similar values, interests, and backgrounds tend to have more stable marriages. On the other hand, risk factors for divorce include low education, financial strain, lack of religious involvement, high stress, and role overload. People whose parents divorced are also more likely to divorce, partly because they may struggle with communication and conflict resolution. Second marriages are also more likely to end in divorce than first marriages. One of the strongest predictors of divorce is poor communication. So couples who argue harshly, show defensiveness, or avoid resolving conflict are at a greater risk. These negative patterns can start even before marriage and often make problems worse over time. Disagreements about money are especially likely to cause conflict and separation. And divorce is usually stressful for everyone involved. It can often bring emotional pain, conflict, financial changes, and custody issues. People often feel sadness, anger, shame, or relief as a result of divorce. Some experience depression, anxiety, loneliness, or unhealthy behaviors like substance use and poor self-care. Divorce is linked to lower life satisfaction, and in some studies, it is linked to poor health outcomes. Not everyone suffers long term, though, so people that leave unhappy marriages often feel better afterwards, and most individuals adapt and recover over time. Women tend to face more financial challenges after a divorce, which can affect their health and well being. Um, about 40% of new marriages involve at least one partner who has been married before. Men are generally more likely than women to remarry, and they do so more quickly. Overall, divorce is difficult, but most people do show resilience, and many experience it as a chance for growth and a fresh start.